I'm Bill Schmidt. You heard that already. This isn't about me. This is about the Hindenburg. Okay. So we're going to get right to it. But there's three things I'd like to ask you. One of those three things is not to do, and the other is do. First one is if you brought a cell phone with you tonight, please mute it or shut it off. The first two are related. The second thing is, please do not raise your hand and ask a question until after the talk is over. I'm 72, and I've got the memory of a peanut. So those two are related. If you interrupt me, this is an hour talk. I might have to start over again because I forgot. So let's try not to interrupt Bill because he's got the brain of a pea, okay? Can't remember, you know the rest of that. Okay. The first thing I'm going to try to do, since I asked you not to ask any questions, well, before I get to that, the third thing I want to ask you to do is this. When was the last time? Now, this question isn't for you because I know you use your imagination all the time. But the rest of us, when was the last time you used it? When I was his age, that's the last time I used it, okay? Until I started doing this talk. And now this has sharpened my imagination. So I'm going to ask you, ladies and gentlemen, to shake off your imagination, put him on and her on right now. Why am I asking you to do that? Because we're on our way on a flight from Frankfurt, Germany to Lakehurst, New Jersey. Better said, we're going to Manchester, New Jersey, because that base is not in Lakehurst, it's in Manchester. Okay, so we're going from Frankfurt, Germany to Manchester, New Jersey on May 3rd, 1937. And it's about 7:30 at night. Okay, before I continue with the story, since I asked you not to answer any questions or ask any questions, I have to try to answer some of your potential questions. There's a guy named Ferdinand Graf von Zeppelin. He's a count. Count Ferdinand Graf von Zeppelin. 126, 127, 128, 129, 130, and 131. Now, 129 was supposed to have been called the Graf Zeppelin, but it got a name change. How did all these Graf Zeppelins get their name? That's the most asked question. It's because of the inventor. And again, his name is Ferdinand Graf von Zeppelin. So a Graf Zeppelin got his name. So from 126 through to 131, they were all supposed to be called Graf Zeppelins. But around the time that the Hindenburg was being built, which would have been 129, just prior to it being built, a gentleman named Paul von Hindenburg. He was a famous World War I general. So World War I was about 1917, around that time. And he won a lot of battles for Germany. But ultimately, Germany lost the war. So when the war was over, he came back to Germany and he said, hey, the German people said, hey, you know, you did such a good job for us in the war. We would like you to become chancellor or president of Germany. So he decided that he would do that. And he had a good long reign up until about 1932, when a gentleman, and I use the term lightly, a gentleman named Adolf Hitler came along. And his advisors went to Paul's advisors and said, Adolf wants your job. And he can take it from you two ways. You can give it to him freely on your own, or he'll have you hung or killed or shot, one or the other, killed. And then he'll take it. Well, Paul, being of sound mind and not a crazy man, he said, maybe it's time. You know, he had it a good long time. We're talking 1918 to 1932. So he decided, I'll slip aside and let Adolf take over. Now, at about like between 1934 and the end of 1935, the Hindenburg was started to being built. And it finished being built in 1935. So this guy here, his name is Hugo Echner. And Hugo Echner, he flew as captain on 126, 127, 128, and now the Hindenburg is just about getting finished. And so he was captain on all of these ships up until the Hindenburg. And this guy here, Count Ferdinand Graf von Zeppelin, he became a very old man. And he went to him and said, I want you to be the CEO of my company. So Dr. Echner, the first thing he did was say to him, you know, I don't like Hitler. I don't like the Third Reich. I don't like anything about the new German system. And he knew that on the tail of the Hindenburg was going to be 2 swastikas. And he also knew that this guy putting those swastikas there was going to be in charge of the company ultimately, not the CEO. He could tell him what to do. And he didn't like that at all. But a month later, out of respect for the Count, he said, yes, I'll become your CEO of the company. There's only one thing I want to do. There's only one thing I want to do between now and the time I become CEO. And that is when the Hindenburg is finished, I want to test fly it to make sure it's safe for us to get on board, the passengers to get on board. So Count said, yeah, you could do that. And he flew the test flight, certified it safe. And now he becomes the CEO of the company. In the 36th season, we got a guy named Ernst Lehmann. Ernst Lehmann is the captain of the Hindenburg. Now, during the 36th season, there were 50 passengers allowed to be on board the Hindenburg. In the 37th season, they added more berths and allowed up to 72 people on board. So they had to get rid of something because the weight between the added people and the amount of berths that had to be increased, they had to get rid of some weight. So there's a grand piano in the lounge. And the grand piano was made of duraluminum. Oh, man, that's heavy. God. Are you strong? Mm-hmm. Can you handle heavy stuff?
Ask somebody else. I have duraluminum at home.
Oh, okay. Anybody else want to grab this? Oh, okay. Wait a minute. I see.
Got somebody?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's heavy. Be careful. Be heavy. Go like this. Yeah. Okay. Duraluminum is what the grand piano was made of. And the entire inside of the Hindenburg. That's what it was made of. The rigid structure. It was called a rigid, lighter than air Zeppelin. Why? Because of this. The whole inside was made of this. The ladder that you got on to get to your bunk, duraluminum. Okay. So Ernst Lehmann made 11 flights during the 36 season from Frankfurt, Germany to Lakehurst or Manchester. 11 flights. And he made additional flights up to 61 to places like Rio de Janeiro, other exotic places, France, England, Italy, places like that in Europe. And like I said, exotic places, Rio de Janeiro, okay? So as captain, he made those flights. Now we're getting close to our flight, the 37 season, and we have more passengers, but because this is the maiden voyage for 1937, or better said, the first voyage, our government receives a letter and the German government receives a letter. And the letter says, your maiden voyage is going to be blown up. We have a bomb on board. Okay. We all know that governments do not keep secrets well. So even though we could have had 72 passengers, as a result of that letter, only 35 brave souls got on board the Hindenburg to go to America. Now, I'm gonna get in the middle and we'll start the story because I've answered most of the questions, except for the fact that Captain Pruss is, in the 37th season, he is the guy who's going to be our captain. Am I in the way? Am I in the way? Okay. Okay. You see the picture of him there? That was after the fire, but I'll cover more of that down the road. Okay, so he is the captain for the 37th season, along with 35 passengers and 62 crewmen and officers. So we have a grand total of 97 people on board the Hindenburg when we're getting ready to take off. Okay. So I'm going to stand in the way because you're not going to be able to see for just a little bit. From the middle, meaning me, I'm German. I told you I was an American German, Bill Schmidt. Over that way, I've made you all German citizens. And down the middle over that way, you're American citizens. But you came from Germany. Originally, you moved to America, but you were Germany. You came from Germany. So the one-way ticket you paid at Lakehurst was $400. We're talking 1937. Are you having a hard time hearing me? Okay. Okay. So it's 1937, and you guys paid $400 to go to Frankfurt, Germany, and now you're going back. On this side, you're going to America. And by the way, we're all rich people. I just made us all rich. Can you say thank you, Bill, for making us all rich people? Okay. So you're all rich. Because in 1937, $400, okay, and a round trip is $800. If the Hindenburg was still in use today, you know how much it would cost to get on board for a round trip flight?
30 grand.
No, $17,000. Okay. So you would still have to be rich people to get on board the Hindenburg. Okay. Still, even today. All right. So we're about to get on board, but I need 2 volunteers, preferably men, but women could do it too, maybe. Okay, you're one. Who's next? Come on up and stand by the table. Who wants to volunteer for the other guy? Nobody?
I'll do it.
Okay. Just stand on this side of the table. Okay, I'm going to turn my back to you for a minute. I'm going to try to raise my voice up so you can hear me. I'm a German, like this side of the room. And there's a lady sitting there, and she's going to take my money. And I go, I'm only going one way. He comes over, grabs this arm. Come on over. Grabs this arm. You come over and grab this arm. And you both say at the same time, the Fuhrer would not like it if you don't come back.
Oh, the Fuhrer would not like it if you don't come back.
Okay. So these are SS men, both of them. You can go ahead and sit down. Thank you. They're both SS men. And so that means that we have to pay a round trip ticket up front. Americans pay $400 to go back home. Germans, whether you come back or not, you're paying the whole amount. Fuhrer would not like it if you don't come back, okay? So now that we've covered paying the fee, about here, there's a ladder that comes down. And that ladder is operated electrically, but it's very much similar to your attic ladder, if you have one in your house. And Hindenburgs and all of the lighter than air ships never actually touched the ground. When they came in for a landing, they had a wheel here and a wheel here, which bounced, boom. Now it's up in the air again. So when that ladder comes down, there's a platform here. And there's a small ladder, 3, 4 rungs, which will transition you from the ground to this ladder. So we're now getting on the ladder and we're going up, and there's an opening about the end of that ladder. And there's a guy standing there. And that guy is in a white coat. And in this hand, he has a basket. And in this hand, he's got his hands extended out towards us. What does he want? Could want a ticket, but that's not what he wants.
Cigarettes, lighters.
You can keep your cigarettes, but lighters and matches are going in that basket. Because there are 16 gas cells from the front to the back of the Hindenburg. And each one of those bags, the grand total of hydrogen that's on board the Hindenburg is 7.4 million cubic square feet of hydrogen. Now, what's the difference between hydrogen and helium? Does anybody know the answer to that? Well, there's no bang. It burns, but there's no bang. Okay. Hydrogen has no bang and no burn. So it's a complete inert gas. Helium, you're right. Sorry. Sometimes I get them too mixed up. I'm a dyslexic person, so that happens occasionally. Anyway, this has hydrogen on board and not helium. Well, Ernst Lehmann was sent on the 37 flight to do two things. One, to make sure that Captain Pruss stayed on time, flew the right path to where they were going, and landed and took off properly. The other thing he was tasked to do by Hitler was to go to our government and say to them, the German government would like to use helium instead of having to use hydrogen. What would have that done? Would have made what happened on May 6, 1937, if they had already had it, it wouldn't have happened. Okay, so they were trying to get it so that this transatlantic flight would be safer, and it would have been. Okay, so we're getting on board, and keep in the back of your mind that this is 1937, and your grandmother smoked a big cigar. Couldn't fit in between those two fingers. Huge. Your grandmother, okay? Everybody smoked. Everybody. There was no such thing as worry about lung cancer or bone marrow cancer or any of that stuff. So now you're telling us we just paid $800 to go on a 2.5-day flight and we can't smoke? Whoa, that's terms for a mutiny, you know? Yeah, they're crazy, real crazy. Okay, but right now I'm not gonna worry too much about that smoking. The Germans made a smoking compartment, but I'll talk about that when I start answering more questions. Okay, after the guy in the white coat, there's a kid who's 14 years old, and his name is Werner Franz. Now, I'm told that his name was actually Werner. I do not have a German accent, so I call him Werner Franz, okay? And as I said, he's 14 years old, and his job on the Hindenburg, he's behind the guy in the white coat. So his job is to take our luggage, the 35 passengers, our luggage to our stateroom, which is here. Okay. You're all going to see this piece of duraluminum after the talk. It'll be here. Inside our stateroom is a ladder to a top bunk and a bottom bunk, is a stool, a writing table, a sink, a curtain, and on the other side of the curtain and in the middle, a mirror for the ladies to put on their makeup. If you've been on a Amtrak bedroom type train, then you'll know what it looked like. If you haven't, you won't then. And this will be here. Again, this storyboard is for me. That stuff there is for you, okay? That's exactly what it looked like. This will keep me on track. Okay, so Captain Pruss and I say his name wrong too because I don't have a German accent, calls Werner and says, you know, I was second in command under Ernst Lehmann. So I watched what Ernst did. Ernst would go to you passengers and send the guy who brought your luggage and knock on your door and say, we'd like you to come on a tour of our gondola. Who wants to go? Remember, he's knocking on your door and he's asking, let me see a show of hands of who wants to go on this tour. All right, there's enough of you that want to go. So as we're walking into the gondola, because there's a ladder that goes down into that, and we're inside, and there's a guy who's dead center, but a tiny bit to the left, and he's got a wheel in his hand. And then dead left, but dead center, there's another guy standing with a wheel in his hand. And above that guy's head, there are two black boxes. Those black boxes are inside. I told you there were 16 gas cells from front to back. And those gas cells have a pipe that's going outside like this, outside the skin of the ship. And there's a air-operated valve at the top of it. And the reason for this is when you get to where you're going, let's say Lakehurst, we're coming from Frankfurt, we're getting to Lakehurst. There's a steel bar that goes through rings that's attached to those 16 buttons. And you pull down. And those 16 valves will open through that air-operated valve, venting hydrogen out of the Hindenburg. Why? Well, on the flight across the pond, you wanted it to be lighter than air. But once you got across the pond and you're getting close to where you're landing, you want it to become heavier than air. So you're venting some of the fuel that keeps you aloft. And what that does is a level, not this, level, you come closer to the ground. Okay, level. So the reason for those black boxes was for what I just told you, to vent hydrogen out of the Hindenburg. So this guy on the center left had two jobs. One was to, if he was near where you're going to land, and the captain says, I need to become heavier than air. He would take that ring, stick it through, or take that bar and stick it through the rings and pull that down all together. And that would make it come closer to the ground. Okay. So the gondola is split into three sections, and that's a good picture. The front section is where we just took this tour. Okay, you have those two guys on the wheels. When the guy left, a little bit left, but dead center in the car, when he turned that wheel, if the captain said 10 degrees to the starboard or 10 degrees port, he would turn that wheel, and these vanes here and on the bottom would turn in that direction. And the Hindenburg could make a turn. If it went the other way, it would go the other way. So you can go turns, straight, or this guy to the left, but dead center, he was left in the gondola. He was in control of these two vanes here. So if the captain said 20 degrees up bubble, well, the first reaction to the guy on that wheel would be, no, sir, you know I can't do that. Therefore, the captain would never say it, okay? But if this guy did follow directions, what would happen?
Descend dynamically.
Well, if he went 20 degrees down bubble, that's what would happen to the Hindenburg. And what's going to happen to us walking to, say, the windows? You're going to either, it depends on your direction. You're either going to fall on your face or you're going to fall on your butt, one or the other. And if we're in the dining room and we're eating something or drinking something, everything is going to slide off that table. So no more than 5 degrees down bubble or 5 degrees up bubble. Why? Because you don't want to kill your passengers, okay? And it would be this. This would go up 5 degrees and then the tail would come with it. And this and this. Let's say there's a peak down there about 3 miles away. And the peak, we're below the peak. But we don't want to turn to go around it or the other way, go around it. We want to fly over the top. We would have to start making 5 degree up bubbles. And now, before we get to the peak, we have to be over the peak. So they're, with binoculars, they're making sure that they're over the peak so that they can continue on. So what I'm trying to do is give you a perspective of how long of a time it would take to make certain moves to accomplish a goal. This was a huge 804-foot long cigar. Huge. 3 football fields long. If I could stand it on its tail next to the Empire State Building, it would go 3/4 of the way up the building. That's 1,100 feet, okay? So it's a big sucker. And it's lumbersome, but it's the best flight you're ever going to have. There was a guy in the 36th season who reported to the Asbury Park Press that he put a quarter on its edge after it got in the air and leveled off, quarter on its edge on the table. And he said until they started making their moves to get lower, that quarter did not fall over. Outboard engines, diesel, you have 4 of them, 2 on one side and 2 on the other. You could do between 85 and 65 miles per hour. But you still would be late getting to Lakehurst. And I'll cover that in a little bit. But for right now, I'm going to switch back to answering some questions. Potential questions. There are 4 reasons why they flew from Frankfurt, Germany to Manchester or Lakehurst. 4 reasons. The first thing is, does anybody know that they had plans to use the Empire State Building as a mooring mast?
Yes.
Okay. Well, they had plans for that, but I'm going to need your help. You just hold this like this. There you go. Okay. Now, here was the plan. Hindenburg comes, and there's a cup on the front of it. And it hooks to the top of the spire of the Empire State Building. Okay, we're hooked. 3 or 4 guys put one of those things that you screw on. That's like a horseshoe thing. I don't know the name of it, but that's how they connected it. Okay, we're connected. How do we get off the Hindenburg to get down the spire? Well, there was the rub. Out of the front, the plan was to have a ladder come down with 3 rungs and a plank that would extend to the spire. 1,100 feet in the air? You'd have to pay me $1 million, and even then, I don't think I would do it. I don't care if it has a rail or not, a railing that I could hold on to. No, not doing that. So, thank you. Thanks for your help. So, this idea didn't go over too big with passengers. Would you have gone across that plank? No, neither would I, and nobody really wanted to do that. So there's 4 reasons. There's 3 on the board here. The first one is, you could see this at the Lakehurst Historical Society Museum, something called the Blue Comet. Now, the Blue Comet is a Jersey Central Railroad train. And it left New York City, went through Hoboken, Newark, all the way down to Atlantic City. But what you don't know is it also stopped at Lakehurst, right on the base. So you could get off the train from New York and get on the Hindenburg and go back. Or you could get off the Hindenburg and get on the train and go to New York City. So the ticket we just bought was billed as Frankfurt, Germany to New York City. And that's why it was able to be built that way. Okay, so that's reason number 1. Reason number 2 is that American Airlines built a terminal right on the base. Now, if you're coming from California and you land here in Lakehurst, New Jersey, you can get off that plane and get on the Hindenburg. If it's in the hangar, you can get on. And then go wherever you want to go, Rio de Janeiro or Frankfurt, Germany, or wherever you want to go. And as long as there was land under you, because you have to remember, the Hindenburg was the only game in town for a transatlantic flight from Europe to America, only game in town. Couldn't put enough fuel on the plane to get you there. Why? Well, if you had passengers, that would mean weight. You would burn more fuel. And so you couldn't refuel at that time over the ocean. Couldn't do it. So as long as this plane had somewhere to land, in other words, let's say you just got off the Hindenburg, you're on the plane, and it's going to California. But it won't make California without landing and refueling. So it needs land under it to land, take on more fuel, and then continue on its flight. Okay. And the third reason is Hangar 1. Hangar 1, our government, US government, decided they were going to build it in 1919. And they finished it in 1921. That makes it, what, 4 years old today? Yes. Now, I told you that the Hindenburg was 804 feet long. Hitler wanted it to be 810 feet long. But Hangar 1 was only 808 feet long, which would have meant that the tail or the nose would have stuck out. And it would have been difficult to work on by our workers because you didn't want it exposed to the weather. So Hitler was really miffed, PO'd, however you want to say it, he was, okay? I got to cut this down to 804 feet because you didn't make it big enough? Yes. So he made it 804 feet. He didn't like that idea because he wanted it to be the biggest thing in the sky with those swastikas showing America. Who did this transatlantic flight for passengers? Who did it? Hitler did it. Okay. And inside, I told you, inside was 808 feet long. So there was a door, and there are two doors, and they either electrically open like this or close. And those doors are 200 feet high. And the front doors are the same, 200 feet high. So when you got inside with the Hindenburg, there was only 1.5 feet to the front door and 1.5 feet to the back door. And so it made it a tight fit, but it fit. And this building, who's been inside Hangar 1? Okay, so there's a few of you. So you're going to recognize what I'm about to do. As a member of Navy Lakehurst Historical Society, I was in that hangar 80 times. And from the first time to the 80th time, my reaction was, holy God, this is the biggest building I've ever been in. It's huge, 200 feet high, by 808 feet long, 3 football fields laid end to end. Whew. I was amazed, and I encourage you to go on a tour if you can, okay? Because it is a very good thing to do. Learn about your history. Okay, now the last reason is part of the first thing that I said about New York City. New York City, the maneuvering would have been tough because of the tall buildings. So maneuvering around there would have been a difficult chore. And if we're connected to the Empire State Building, this is what's happening because of the high winds. Now try to cross that plank while you're doing this. Or, as in one of those books, by the way, if you're done looking at the book, pass it on to your neighbor so they can look at it. Here's the spire on the Empire State Building. And if you look in that book, you will see a picture of one that's on the ground at Lakehurst, and it's a Navy ship. It stands straight in the air like this. So what if we're on the spire on the Empire State Building and this decides to, because of barometric pressures, decides to stand straight in the air? What are you going to slide down that plank onto the spire? No. So going to Lakehurst made it possible because you only had one 200-foot high building there at that time, one. Now you got plenty of airspace to make your moves, to get lower, to get higher. You have plenty of ground space to land in. Plenty of, see, big ground space. And that's what a big cigar at 804 feet requires. You need plenty of room. So Lakehurst or Manchester was the place. Okay, so let's get back to the story. Except for one more thing. Remember I said, we're going 2.5 days on the Hindenburg, and they just told us we can't smoke because they took away our lighter and our matches. Oh, mutiny time. Oh, are you kidding? What do you mean 2.5 days? Well, Germans' ingenuity, they built a room behind the kitchen that was going to be making our gourmet dinners. It's connected by a pipe. Those two rooms were made under a positive pressure. Positive pressure means nothing on the outside can get inside the room. And nothing that happens inside the room can get outside the room. So now we can smoke in that room. The same guy in the white coat that took your lighter and your matches away from you, he's walking up to you with an electric lighter inside that room, and he says, "Ma'am, I see you smoke a pipe. Let me light that for you. Sir, I see you smoke a cigarette. Let me light that for you. Ma'am, I notice you have that big fat cigar in your fingers. Let me light that for you." And now we're going to go, whoa, that's great. Excellent. We can relax. We can go this 2.5 days and nobody's saying we can't have a cigarette or a cigar or our pipe. You can have your tobacco now. And we're all happy over that. So let's go back to the story. Finished with potential questions. And that's not to say that you won't have more at the end, because you will. Here's A deck, and below it is B deck. A deck in the middle is where our berths are. So there's no windows. That's just meant for sleeping. That's it. Along the side is where our dining area is, and it's a 5-star gourmet type thing. You have gold inlay in the plates. You have real silverware straight through. Food is cooked by gourmet cooks. That's why it costs so much. Part of why it costs so much. And on this side is where in the 36 season, the grand piano used to be. That would be this room here. But see, it's not here because in our flight, it was removed because of the extra space that was required for more people to sleep and also more people to get on board. And on this side and this side is the observation lounge. And the observation lounge is not the gondola. So it's right about here. Windows would have gone right about there. And those windows would open out and up. And there was a ledge. You see that ledge right there. Okay. That would be about your belly height. And you could quite literally do this, and you'd be hanging out the window, looking down. Flying fish, whales, sharks, any kind of fish over water, that was our entertainment, looking out those windows. Because they took out the only form of entertainment with the piano, the grand piano, okay? And if we were over a city, and this, a gentleman that I worked with at Lakehurst Navy Lakehurst Historical Society, he was 5 years old when this flight took place, and his mom said to him, "Go out, the Hindenburg's flying over, go out and wave to them. Hey, up there in the Hindenburg, how are you?" And the people on the Hindenburg would be out that window looking down, going, "Hey, down there on the ground in New York City, how are you?" Or Hoboken, or wherever you were. They could talk to you and you could talk to them. Average cruising altitude for the benefit of the passenger was 300 to 600 feet. Huh? Yeah, right, right. And it was for the benefit of the passenger and no other reason, okay? It could have went as high as 1,100 feet because we talked about the Empire State Building, okay? Could have. But it's typical cruising altitude for the benefit of us on board, 300 to 600 feet. Okay, so we've transitioned across the Atlantic and we're over New York City, and it's about 6:30 in the morning on May 6th, 1937. And all of a sudden, Ernst Lehman, who went for two reasons, one to get the helium and also to make sure Pruss stayed on time. By the way, I'll tell you something that I should wait till the end, but I won't. Ernst Lehman got third-degree burns from his heels to the back of his head. And he went to Paul Kimball Hospital that day, and 3 days later, he died. But I also mentioned that another part of his job was to go to our government to get helium instead of having to use hydrogen. But in 1927, our government, the Senate and the House, passed a bill called the Helium Act. And that Helium Act said, since this was a very difficult renewable gas, at that time it was a very difficult renewable gas. And we weren't going to share it with any other country, least of all Germany, because we felt they were going to start some kind of war or something. So you don't give to them what's good for your enemy. You just don't do it. But anyway, that Helium Act would have prevented everything. Ernst Lehman died from his burns. So he wasn't able to go and ask, but if he had lived, he wouldn't have gotten it. Okay, so again, we're over New York City. It's 6:30 in the morning, and Ernst Lehman is now starting to pat Captain Pruss on his belly like this. And he's going, you know, the Fuhrer is going to shoot us, or he's going to hang us when we get back. So Pruss says, what are you talking about? Why? Why would he do that? Well, you know, he told me if we weren't on time, that he was going to shoot us. Okay, well, Captain Pruss says to him, look, I made 11 flights with you from Frankfurt, Germany to America, and never once were you on time. Yeah, but the Fuhrer didn't tell me he was going to shoot me then either. Well, what's the big deal there? Well, you have what's called trade winds. When you come from England to America, you're under very stiff headwinds. And even though your capability is, the max would be 85 miles per hour, these stiff headwinds would still slow you down. Now, when you're going back, the tailwind is now a very stiff tailwind, so it'll speed you up. So no matter what, it only took 2.5 days on both trips, 2.5 days. So if you went there, if you went to America, it would be 2.5 days. And if you went to England or you know, the EU, it would be 2.5 days. One way would wash out the other way. Okay, so we're over New York City, and we hear in the center portion of our gondola, this is split up into 3 sections. The front is where all the action takes place to get up and to go down. The middle section is a 2-way radio so that we can be contacted from the ground. And the third section the longer this takes, the more I'm going to have to start over. Okay. Okay. Thank you for that, by the way. So the aft section is where those who are not doing anything, and there's always 16 officers and crewmen, so they total 16 on duty. but not all of them are on duty at the same time. So those that are doing nothing, they have coffee and maybe a donut or a bagel in the back. There's tables, and they can sit there. So this radio room starts to chime. It's the commander of the Lakehurst Naval Air Station. And he's about to tell them, he says, look, I need to talk to Captain Pruss. Can you get him to the microphone? Yeah, so Captain Pruss comes, and this commander at Lakehurst says, I can't allow you to land. Cannot allow you to land. Well, now Ernst Lehman is not patting anymore, he's poking. Ask him, how long, what's going on? Why is this happening? How long is this going to take? When are we going to be able to land? And the Naval Air Station commander says, first off, it's raining cats and dogs, harder than cats and dogs. There's lightning, there's thunder, there's heavy winds, heavier than we've ever seen. And low to the ground, there's a lot of fog. So I got to tell you, you cannot land there yet. Well, how long is this going to take? Ernst Lehman says. You know what? I'll consult with Mother Nature and ask her when she's going to give this up. But here's what you're going to do between now and when she gives this up. You're going to go from New York City down to Atlantic City along the coast. And you're going to turn. And if I haven't called you and tell you it's okay, you're going to go back to New York City up the coast. And you're going to do that as many times as it takes for Mother Nature to get off our case. Well, Ernst Lehman is about to have a baby because he knows the Fuhrer is going to shoot him or hang him, one or the other. Okay? So they go down to Atlantic City once. They go back to New York City once. And now they've made their turn and are starting to go. And they get as far as Forked River. Better if I show you here. Forked River. And the commander of the base says, calls him up and says, and now it's 7 o'clock at night when he calls. So they're over 12 hours late. And he says, you can make your landing now. It's okay. Conditions are non-existent from what I told you at 6:30 in the morning. Are non-existent. Everything's changed. It's good. So at Forked River, he makes a turn and he starts his way back to Lakehurst Naval Air Station or Manchester. And during this area here, he has two unwritten rules that he has to follow. The first one is whenever you're venting hydrogen from those bags, you must fly in a straight line for 1.5 miles. And the reason for that is you want all that gas to be behind you off the skin of the ship. So he follows the rule. This is a rule written by Hugo Echner, and it isn't written. It's just everyone knows that you are supposed to go in a straight line for 1.5 miles. And he follows that rule for the first time he's dumping fuel. Hydrogen is the fuel that makes this thing lighter than air. So now he's dumping fuel, making it heavier than air, getting closer to the ground. And he doesn't have to worry about this or this. It just comes down level to the ground. So he follows that rule. And the next thing is an unwritten rule is you never want to do this with the Hindenburg. Sharp turns. You never want to make a sharp turn, ever. So that first term, the turn you want to make is like an S curve, wide and sweeping. And the reason why you don't want to do that, you don't want to make that sharp turn, is inside there are bags, like I told you, 16 from front to back. And here is a picture of the bag. And around that is what I call a stopgap, or something that holds that bag in place so it doesn't move around long distance. And on the other side, there's another one. So if you made that sharp turn, you have a chance of that bag violently hitting those supports. So unwritten, but every commander of these lighter than air ships followed the rule, wide and sweeping. You don't make sharp turns. So he does that in the first turn up there. And when he's at this spot, he's now venting more hydrogen again, the second time. And he goes 1.5 miles, follows the rule. And when he comes to the next turn, he follows the rule, wide and sweeping. But, and this is not, I like to say haste makes what? Okay, now he made a mistake, but this wasn't necessarily his fault. Because here's the mooring mast that he's going to. So here's his flight pattern as he's finishing that last turn. The big mistake was not entirely his fault. He's venting more hydrogen right now at this spot. But he doesn't fly 1.5 miles. He only goes 500 feet. And the reason for that is the wind direction is coming this way, which means it's into the front of the ship. Any vehicle you fly in the air, some of you guys that were in the Air Force or whatever, you know you're supposed to keep the nose of your ship into the wind. So when the wind was coming this way, all of a sudden it shifted from this direction. So now it was entering this way, and now it's coming this way. So he has to make a sharp turn. Has to. And when he does, in this spot here, that bag in this spot slaps into those supports very violently. And it breaks 2 straps on one of the supports. So we now have a situation that's almost bad, because now he makes a haste makes waste decision, because he's more than 12 hours late. It's now probably around 7:15, 7:20. And he makes another sharp turn here to get to the mooring mast. Because he's late, haste makes waste. And when he did that, in this spot where the bag had ripped open, had broken those 2 straps, now this last turn slams them violently again, and those 2 broken straps rip open the pigskin bag in the aft section. How do I know that happened? Because from the ground, the sailors that were there to grab the mooring lines said that they saw a rippling on the skin of the ship at this point. That was the hydrogen trying to get out from under the skin. Okay, so we have almost the perfect storm. Almost. Right about now, I'm going to take us all off to Hindenburg, because you're nice people. I don't want to see you die, and I don't want to die either. So through your imagination, we're on the ground looking about 150 feet in the air. And we're part of almost 300 people because there was no, you can't come on the base then. This was the 1937 first flight. Everybody wanted to see it. So there was 300 people on the ground, and we're part of that now. And we're looking up. Now, I told you there was 97 people on board. And I saw in the museum, the Lakehurst Historical Society Museum, I saw a paper from that era. And it said 80 dead. You talk about fake news today. No, there was not 80 dead. How many people died that day? 35 in total, but 13 passengers and 22 officers and crewmen, to total 35. And one guy on the ground who was, see here, there wasn't enough Navy guys to grab the mooring lines and pull it towards the mooring mast. So they allowed 200 people from Lakehurst to come in the base and help those guys grab those mooring lines and pull it towards the mooring mast. They paid, the Zeppelin Corporation paid $1 and a ham sandwich for you to do that. Well, one guy on the ground, and they don't know exactly what happened, but they did find him dead the next day. He either tripped over the railroad tie that was there, or he just saw this big burning cigar coming straight at him, and he just had a heart attack and died. But that makes 36 dead altogether. Before the fire started, you would think, maybe all 97 were dead, because it only took 34 seconds from 150 feet in the air to hit the ground completely and totally burned up. Gone. Nothing but the door aluminum left. So in that amount of time, you would think, geez, I would think not too many people got out of that alive. But no, that's not the case. Our cabin boy, when this thing started leaking, the Hindenburg began to do this because it leaked in the back. So the Hindenburg is starting to drop like this. The back is becoming heavier than air, and the front is staying the way it is because those cells from this spot are okay. And it's dropping and it's dropping. And then when they dropped the mooring lines, you had a negative electrostatic charge go up the mooring line because it began raining again. Up the mooring line, and whenever you fly across the Atlantic, you pick up negative electrostatic charges on the skin of the ship. And the Hindenburg became a huge capacitor, drew in power, electric, and then when it got full, it discharged that full power, which means this. The skin of the ship and the door aluminum were about that far apart. And when it got fully charged, there was a spark that could be seen from the ground throughout the entire inside of the Hindenburg. A spark that danced. So when it danced in this spot, now we have the perfect storm. And that fire begins. 34 seconds later, it's on the ground, completely burned up. But our cabin boy, who went forward when Captain Pruss said, now that I have this leak and it's starting to do this, he sent them up forward with the 6 other men that did his job. So, and at the same time, he dropped water out of the back, a big bag, 1,100 gallons. He dropped it out. He said, I'll fill it up when we land, you know. And he thought when he did that, it would start to bring it back level. But he didn't realize how bad that leak was. That entire bag emptied. So before the fire starts, our cabin boy and the 6 guys, he memorized all the escape hatches. He walked over to the escape hatch. He said, "You follow me." A bag of water broke over their heads. And the fire now is starting to do this. This bag is already on fire, burning, and now it ignites the next bag, and the next bag, and the next bag, and so forth, until the fire is shooting out like a cannon out of the front of the Hindenburg. So once it's on the ground, 34 seconds later, you would have thought everybody's dead. But again, our cabin boy and the 6 guys who followed him got out through that escape hatch. 10, 15 feet from the ground, you kick it out and out you go. Also, these windows, passengers would collect at these windows when you were landing or when you were taking off, because you wanted to see what was going on. So as it got, again, closer to the ground, 10, 15 feet, Matilda, who has 2 sons, one 8 and one 10, and a 14-year-old daughter and a husband, are at those windows. But the 14-year-old daughter gets scared and she runs back to the stateroom. So Pop has to go get her. They both died in the fire. But Matilda and her 2 sons, one is, I said, 8 and the other is 10. 10, 15 feet off the ground, drop them out the window. And the kid bounces because he's, wiry and, doesn't break bones easily like we do. He survives. He's got a few cuts, a few burns, but he survives. He's alive. The 8-year-old or the 10-year-old, mom does the same thing with him. Again, bounces, bruises, he's still alive. Okay. So here's a fact. Our cabin boy, he lived till 2014. And the 8-year-old lived till 2019. And I don't have too much more to say about this, except for Captain Pruss saved 14 out of the 16 people on the gondola. How did he do that? One guy on this shoulder, one guy on this shoulder, out he goes. Back in. He did this 7 times. One guy on this shoulder, one guy on this shoulder. So 14 of the 16 people, Captain Pruss saved. And you remember the picture from the beginning where his nose looked like it was burned off? It was. Ernst Lehmann died from severe burns, 3rd-degree burns, up his entire back. And Captain Pruss lived, but the reason why he didn't save the last 2 guys was because the chief petty officer who was in charge of the line handlers said, military men, meaning sailors, stand fast. And the next time you see that guy come out here, don't let him go back in. He's the captain. He's going to know what happened. So they stopped him after the 7th time. He couldn't go back in for the 8th time to get the 2 people. Okay. All right. So I'm pretty much done. The only thing I'm going to say is haste makes waste. And God puts in each one of us an incredible ability to stay alive. We will bite, push, scratch, kick, whatever it takes to stay alive. And 61 people in total lived that day because of that. Okay, I'm pretty much done. Yeah, well, wait a second. I'm pretty much done. The only thing I'm going to tell you is there's some stuff up on the table here to look at if you wish. And these pictures that you were looking at, couldn't see, will be here also. And after that, now it's time for questions.
So our airships not about the same.
They did, yes.
I was going to ask before, if the Union must, but you answered the question.
Go ahead.
I have 2 questions.
Sure.
Across the Atlantic, because this is before radar and GPS, were they reckoning based on the stars at night?
Pretty much, yeah, yeah.
And then you also said in order to land, they had to let some helium go.
Right.
Hydrogen go.
Right.
So that to me says, well, then the next time they want to take off, they've got to refill themselves.
And they did that inside Hangar 1.
Ah.
Mhm. Now, Hangar 1, there's something that I really didn't cover when I was talking, but they had safety on their mind all the time. You know, the bottom floor was made of brick. And suppose you had a workman in there with a steel wrench working on something. What's bound to happen? Slips out of his hand and it falls to the ground. That could cause a spark, right? Guess what? They glued rubber strips to the top of the bricks, so there's no spark. Okay, continue with your questions.
We have about 2 minutes left.
Okay. Which one?
The one just, I heard the first two.
I don't think, did you ask a question?
I did.
Okay.
I asked how could we get to where the base to see all this base?
Okay, the question was, how do you get on the base to tour the Hindenburg site? It works this way. You need to give them 2 weeks in advance notice. You need to go to Navy Lakehurst Historical Society on the web, click on that name, which will open their website, and you'll find a phone number and an email address. I suggest you use both to book your tour. And that's how you'll be able to get on the base.
Question. Years ago, you had Navy blimps, smaller blimps go all looking for submarines. But I heard that they made a giant dirigible called the Ohio. Was it one of those big blimps?
I don't know if it was, I can't answer your question because I don't rightly know a whole lot about Navy vessels, okay? I know Hindenburg only, but Navy vessels, I only know that they were 750 feet long and that they were 125 feet in circumference, okay?
Bill, I'll talk to him after, because I just saw that.
Okay,
So I'll take care of that one for you.
all right.
Question I have for you, since both governments got the letter,
Yeah,
nothing came of the letter?
well, they searched for 3 days prior to the confab that they had inside Hangar 1. Confab means they had a meeting. And since they combed the entire area, if there was a bomb on board, there would have been some pieces of it left over on the ground. And there was none. So it was determined that the most scientific thing that brought the Hindenburg down was what I told you. Right. And everything else is just, who killed Kennedy? You can get a million rumors, a million, you know, so this is the most scientific. Go ahead.
So back in 1937, was there anything comparable to the National Safety Transportation Board to study this crash? And what happened to all the aluminum girders? Like, were they all shipped back to Germany?
Somewhere not. Remember, you were allowed to go on that base and nobody was there to stop you to go on it. So
In other words, some of the Hindenburg could be in people's houses right now?
absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. This piece here, the gentleman in the back went home and got it. It's a piece of duraluminum from the Hindenburg. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, there are all kinds of people have it. Should we bring this to a close now? Yeah. Okay.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you. Did you